All right, well, we will assume that everyone is with us that wants to be with us, and so we are into chapter 26 on this Friday afternoon. Lots of stuff in here about fools, and Michael, I want to say that because I didn't highlight a lot of those parables or proverbs because I felt like we've seen them before, but a lot of what I think would constitute warnings against using fools, hiring fools, giving fools honor. There's a lot of fool language in this chapter, but for whatever reason, those were not, for the most part, proverbs that caught my attention, with the exception of a couple that I'll look at in a second. So I don't know if you had anything in the first few verses.
I'm looking at verse 4, but anything, yeah, go ahead.
Well, so 4 and 5 are very interesting because in 2 verses, we have verses that say the exact opposite. Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself. Verse 5, answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes. So don't talk to a fool. Don't correct a fool. It makes you a fool. Answer fools, or they remain foolish. And to our comments the other day, I think this highlights the fact that the wise person knows what to do when. The idea that we can have contrasting proverbs and that the reader is left to discern the wisdom of when to apply which one is very interesting, I think. I don't think we've seen this before, certainly not back-to-back proverbs that say the exact opposite thing.
Right, and there's something deeply true about the noise of foolishness. There tends to be just a ton of stuff said and just comments made. The fool tends to not spare words. And I think, Clint, the idea of not responding in kind and then flipping that on its head and saying, do respond, sort of emphasizes that noisiness that happens there, that foolishness and wisdom so often go together in the same channel, and it's hard to discern one from the other. And to your point, there is a kind of, if you're looking at the book of Proverbs, there's a kind of character that is able to discern that, a kind of aged wisdom that is able to process that. But there's also some Ecclesiastes in this. There is some that it's all vanity. At the end of the day, wisdom and foolishness gets distributed on the same TV. It gets distributed over coffee the same way, right? Is that it all uses words and time and relationships. And so there is sort of this sense, no matter how wise you are or how foolish you are, there is some human connection between both in it.
Yeah, and I don't want to make this a social media thing, but as do we all. I have some friends, and on their Facebook accounts, they just plow away with whatever theme they think is important. And there are many times that I see them post something that just, it isn't right. Either it isn't accurate, or the logic is faulty, or it's just ridiculous. And there's always that temptation to wade into that. But that's what they want. They want to argue. They want to, what's the old thing? Never argue with a pig. You get muddy and the pig kind of likes it. And that's the idea. Don't answer fools. But then there are other people in your life, answer fools. There are people who the relationship or their desire not to want to be foolish gives you a permission to speak. And you'd say, well, actually, did you check that source? Because I think that may not be accurate. And they say, oh, yeah, thank you. And the idea that the wise person knows when to engage foolishness and when not to is, I think, really, it highlights the character of wisdom that I think this book is trying to parse out for us. There are times when you should just let fools be fools because you can't stop them and you don't want to sink to that level. There are other times when you offer a bit of insight that may be helpful to a person in their own moment of foolishness. And the wisdom, of course, is knowing which moment is which.
That's really well said, Clint. That's
So
good.
then, I don't know what you have, Michael. Stop me if you want to pick up something
Nope,
in
you're good.
between. But we moved to Proverb 26:11. This is my all-time favorite proverb. I like it for so many reasons. Like a dog returning to its vomit is a fool who returns to his folly or reverts to his folly. I partly like anything that has vomit in it because this is a great verse with middle schoolers. They love the idea that there's dog throw up in the Bible. I have a friend in Texas who actually put these lyrics into kind of a country song for me and wrote a little song about fools returning to their folly. And but there is, right, a certain cyclical nature to our foolishness. We tend to recycle foolishness, and not all of us are fools in every area, but the areas in which we are tempted to be foolish tend to come around on us again and again. And we see that probably most especially in addiction, where we get trapped into a particular behavior or a particular vice. But there is a kind of the pointlessness of, in this case, the very graphic image of a dog returning to its vomit. That's to what it is to be on the foolishness merry-go-round and just go back to it again and again and again.
Yeah, I don't want to be that guy to point out that some of your favorite verses in Proverbs have been extravagant metaphors, and I think that theme continues here.
Yes, absolutely.
I do think there is something very, once again, earthy in this image that you seem to be drawn to. I think there's a sense in which foolishness very often comes across as being inert or being relatively value neutral. That if you're foolish, you're lazy, stuff doesn't get done, but you generally just make it through in life. And in some cases, the Proverbs peel back that layer and they reveal to us that it's not inert, that foolishness is destructive. It is, in this case, this image, it's disgusting, it's revolting. And
it's something that should be expelled from your life. I mean,
right. And that kind of movement, I think, is significant because we do become complacent in life. And we do this idea of being a fool or being wise. We might be tempted to not give it enough energy that it's due. And the Proverbs points out the foolishness of that.
Right. And then it balances that, I think, with verse 12. Do you see people wise in their own eyes? There's more hope for the fool than for them. And here we've had this whole book about being wise. And here is a critique of people who think they've attained wisdom. There is a humility in wisdom that will not allow us to claim ourselves as a wise one. Wise people are innately and by definition humble people because wisdom is never arrogant. And so the person who thinks they're wise is, in that moment at least, being a fool. And I think that's a great contrast. That verse is also a gem, I think.
I'm looking at verse 18 and 19 here, Clint. Like a maniac who shoots deadly firebrands and arrows, so is the one who deceives a neighbor and says, I'm only joking. I've got two quick comments on this, and this is, the first is this. This verse is directly applicable to 9-year-olds. Like, this is a thing that happens every day in the life of a 9-year-old. I have a 9-year-old, so I can tell you that with great confidence. The other is that I do think we really should slow down and pause and reflect on the through line here. That words unto themselves that are shot out are deadly. That you can't come back around and cover it up with other words. You can't spew nonsense and then come back out and say, but that was just nonsense, let's all laugh about it, right? You can't make a joke of the arrows, the deadly firebrands that have been shot out. And we sometimes, we really do undervalue the power of what we say. And it's not just truth and untruth. I think it is the kinds of things we shoot out into the world, into relationships, into the people who are closest to us. These things leave lasting wounds, and you can't just cover that up with, oh, I was just joking.
Yeah, I had those circled as well. I also picked up 16 and 17, Michael. Verse 16, the lazy person is wiser in self-esteem. Literally in the Hebrew, that says something like in their own eyes than 7 who can answer discreetly. And, it's funny. I think those of us who, if we've ever struggled with slothfulness or acedia, it's sometimes called, the idea that we're going to do something. Well, I'm going to do this. I have these great plans that I realistically will never get around to. So the lazy person is wiser, is greater in their own eyes than they have any right to be. And I think we've all encountered that at some level. And then verse 17, like somebody who takes a passing dog by the ears is one who meddles in the quarrel of another. The idea that you just grab a random dog by the ears, you are going to get bit. And this is the wisdom of not jumping into other people's arguments, of staying out of things that aren't your business. And again, there is a time to engage, but as per the ways of wisdom, there is a time certainly not to engage. I like both of that. Also, Michael, all respect to 9-year-olds, I also have 20. For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no whispering, quarrels cease. So to your point about the power of words, if we stop the argument, I am a last word person, always have been, and it has gotten me in no shortage of trouble in my life, especially in my young life. But if we put away the whispering, the grumbling, if we put away the complaining and the talking behind someone's back or the last ugly word, then the quarrel ceases, like fire is burnt out. And I think that's a nice image, the idea that as godly people, our calling is to starve conflicts of oxygen, to let them burn out rather than add fuel to them. And it says it, the very next verse, as charcoal is to hot embers and wood to fire, so is the quarrelsome person for kindling strife. And I like the idea that part of our calling as people of Christ is to let conflicts smolder and not re-stoke them, not fuel them with more and get them started again.
Looking towards the end here, Clint, I'm at 24. An enemy dissembles in speaking while harboring deceit within. When an enemy speaks graciously, do not believe it, for there are 7 abominations concealed within. I was reflecting on how modern culture has in many ways disposed of the enemy. I point to even some of the latest children's films like Frozen and some of these Disney films. There is no more traditional antagonist in the story itself. The antagonist is often the main character because they have a dark side within themselves, right? And I do think we should be careful. I'm not advocating that Christians should go out creating enemies, but the Proverbs has this natural way of identifying that there are people who do not have your best interest in heart. And when these people show up and they suddenly have nice things to say for you, it would be foolish to just take that at face value without some reflection. And I do think that we live in a time when wisdom does look like some discerning of the spirits to know, is this someone who really is an ally or a friend, or is this someone who doesn't have the best interest of myself or my community or whatever, my family at heart? And that is an important thing to recognize as you seek to try to behave responsibly in the world.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to that. I wonder, I take that in a very different way, Michael, and this is one of the great things about the Proverbs. I've always been intrigued. I grew up with women, and so, like insulting people's appearance and stuff, that was pretty much off limits. It's not that people wouldn't talk about others. That was not off limits, but not to them. And so this thing that people do sometimes where they'll see someone and they'll say, oh, you haven't skipped any meals lately, somebody who's gained weight, or boy, you must be doing, the idea that you sort of give these slaps in the face in nice ways. An enemy speaks graciously, but there's ugliness in it. And I don't know if those people, are they your friends? Is someone who would say that stuff to you? I wouldn't want to push the enemy thing too far, but it's always been a curious thing to me that people feel permission to insult others under the guise of humor, kind of the joking thing that we saw above. It's not something that I think is a good plan.
Yeah, I think we're not going to bore you all with what could be a very long conversation about Enneagram numbers right now, and how we joke about that. But I do think there's a sense in which, for me, the idea of harboring deceit is a particularly compelling image, because I think often, especially in our culture, it's not true in every culture, I don't think, but that we do have this weakness where the loudest person often gets heard the quickest, and we often consciously or unconsciously attribute sort of more weight to the person who's eloquent. And if someone is eloquent, that doesn't mean that they're not an enemy. It just means that in this instance, they're saying something forcefully or compellingly. And wisdom, I think, requires that you step back and you consider. And even in your example, Clint, I do think we must have some discernment in recognizing where there is some grain of truth in that passing comment, and where you just sort of need to cut that one and let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, Michael, the last one I had was 27. Whoever digs a pit will fall in it, and a stone will come back on the one who starts it rolling. And, the Bible has a lot to say about not seeking revenge or not implementing plans against another person. And, we'd have to unpack this. If I were preaching this, I think it gives you permission to go in lots of direction. But the idea that you want to do harm to another is inevitably harmful to yourself. The feelings, the desire to visit something bad on another person do stain your own soul. They corrupt your own spirit as well. And the Proverbs, I think, has some wisdom for us, has some things to say about that.
Yeah, Clint, I think the most poignant image for me as it relates to that actually comes from Harry Potter, the telling of Voldemort, the sort of evil enemy, the antagonist in that story. I think it was just an amazingly well-crafted depiction of how this person became literally more animalistic the more harm that they did to others. It literally deformed not just their soul, but their body. And there's a deep sense in which the sins that plague us work their way out of us. And as we do damage to those around us, it is simultaneously schisming the very soul that we have. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Scripture speaks with such a clear voice about the dangers and temptations of selfishness. And we get this call over and over again to trust God to do for us what we couldn't do for ourselves, because if we were left to our own devices, we would not only be hurting others, but we'd be wounding ourselves eternally.
Yeah, I think that offers us some guidance, some wisdom about the temptation of ugliness in general.
It's not the most upper of a point for the last word on a Friday Bible study, but hopefully there's truth in it.
Yeah, I think, a lot. It's a good chapter, a lot in there. There were lots of things that caught my attention. I actually think chapter 27, if you're with us Monday, chapter 27's got a lot of great Proverbs in it. I think it's a fun chapter. I suppose there's something in all of them, but some of my favorites, perhaps even more weighty than dog returning to its vomit, are found in chapter 27.
Probably the last word here, friends, is you are invited to join us for the service of remembrance for Marilyn Lippin happening tomorrow. That is live streaming at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
That will happen in the sanctuary, and it is open, that's right, but the family's requesting? Why don't you fill in those details, Clint?
No, visitation is at 1, from 1 to 2. The service starts at 2. I think at this point the burial is going to be family service. They are requesting people to wear masks. They have some immunocompromised or at-risk people in the family, and so they are asking people who attend to wear masks, and we will do our best to distance as well in the sanctuary depending on the attendance. But if you can be with us tomorrow to celebrate Marilyn's life, you are certainly welcome. If not, I know that the family would appreciate hearing from you, as Marilyn was a pillar in this church, certainly the entire time I've been here and well before that as well.
And if you hope you can participate in that, then we will see you on Sunday for worship, both live streaming and also in the sanctuary.
Absolutely. We hope that you have a great weekend. Appreciate you being with us this afternoon, and we'll see you sometime between now and Monday.
Be blessed, everyone. Thank you for spending time with us today as we study Scripture together. If you haven't already, we would invite you to follow us on Facebook or subscribe on YouTube. It's a great way to get notified when these studies happen every day at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Of course, if you've already done that, we would love for you to be able to give the video a like, to share it if you're on Facebook. This is a great way for other people to find the Bible study and be able to join us in this time studying Scripture. If this is your first time here, welcome. It's such a joy to have you be with us this day, and we would love to get to know you better. We would love if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to go to our website, fpcspiritlake.org/welcome. We'd love to get your name and email address, and we'll follow up with you personally to thank you for spending time with us this day. And for each and every person that is able to study Scripture and engage in this conversation, we want to say thank you. We look forward to our next time with you every weekday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. And until then, God bless.